Good evening. My name is Dave Randle, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the third of the International Day series. Today, we're celebrating Biodiversity Day, and we just received a few hours ago greetings from the Biological Diversity Convention in Montreal, Quebec, the Center for the UN Biological Diversity Programs, and they were quite pleased that the city of St. Petersburg had taken the initiative to bring this important issue and day to the world's attention. And speaking of the world's attention, we also have, as of 2 hours ago, last time I checked, 1,567 people that have signed up online to view this presentation this evening from 81 countries in the world. So we welcome the world to St. Petersburg to participate in this program. Our speaker this evening, Sheila Watt-Cloutier, has been a political representative for the Inuit people at the regional, national, and international levels, and most recently as international chair for the Circumpolar Conference of the Inuit people. She has worked on a variety of social and environmental issues affecting the Inuit people, and has most recently focused on persistent organic pollutants, POPs as they're called, and global climate change. She's received numerous awards and honors for her work and has been featured in a number of documentaries and profiled by journalists from all media around the world. Some of her awards have included the esteemed Sophie Prize from the Sophie Foundation in Oslo, Norway, the Champion of the Earth Award from the United Nations Environment Program in Kenya, the Northern Medal Governor General of Canada Award. That was just in 2005. And in 2006, the International Environmental Leadership Award of the 10th Annual Green Cross Millennium Awards, hosted by Global Green in Los Angeles, an honorary doctorate of law in the University of Winnipeg, Canada, a citation of lifetime achievement from the Canadian Environment Awards in Vancouver, the International Environment Award of Earth Day in Toronto, and appointed to the Order of Greenland Inuit Circumpolar Conference General Assembly in Alaska. So what is she going to do in 2007? Well, in 2007, I'm pleased to report that just 2 months ago, on February 2nd, the Globe and Mail published a report that Sheila Watt-Cloutier, along with former Vice President of the United States Al Gore, have been nominated for the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize. The report stated that they had been nominated by the Norwegian members of Parliament representing both the most conservative and the most liberal wings of the Norwegian Parliament. So let's give a warm welcome to Sheila Watt-Cloutier.
Thank you for inviting me. I've come from the Arctic and all the way to warm Florida, so thank you so much to David and to the others who have invited me to speak here this evening and to be linked to, how many, I think you said about 80 countries, 81 countries. That's how we are today, aren't we? We're just so connected. And that's the real message that I have been trying to give to the rest of the world, is that we are all connected. And I am very pleased to be part of this series of events that are celebrating the United Nations International Days. And with regard to my own work, it's particularly relevant that I address you on this Biological Diversity Day, because a lot of the work that I have been doing certainly has been concerned with these links of climate change in the Arctic and the animals on which we still subsist. And I certainly appreciate the importance of recognizing this day around the world. And I applaud the good work, certainly, of the United Nations Environment Program and the many organizations that have joined together to coordinate all of these events here as well. And of course, the university here, and the Environmental Research Center, and of course this wonderful center, the Mahaffee Theater here, Very, very nice. And it's nice to be able to come down. We have a long spring this year where it's still quite cold, where I've been snowing all week. And as much as I love my Arctic and I love my snow and ice and I fight to defend it, I like to thaw out once in a while too. So I am enjoying the warmth today. And so I come from a little place called Kuujjuaq, Nunavik. I was born and raised there. In the first 10 years of my life, I traveled only by dog team because that was the only mode of transportation when I was growing up, as we were hunting and fishing. I now live in Nunavut, the newest territory in Canada, in Iqaluit, which is the capital. I am a mother of 2 adult children, a grandmother of a little boy who is almost 10 and who is hunting and caught his first bearded seal last August, and about 2 weeks ago his first caribou. So we're very proud of that, and we celebrate that a lot. And for lots of people who seem to understand that the Arctic is a harsh place, for us it's a land that embraces us and gives us everything we could possibly want, not just to survive, but to thrive, in fact. And so, but we have been going through tremendous, tremendous changes in the Arctic since I was born. And for most societies that have taken about 350 years to adjust and adapt to this new world order of globalization, for us it's been in one lifetime. And so just in that one lifetime of traveling by dog team, I now fly jets to Florida or beyond, South Africa, to help UN treaties, or elsewhere in Europe. So just to give you that snapshot, of how quickly things have happened for us in just one lifetime. And it does give new meaning to having gone from ice age to space age in one lifetime. And so I headed the Canadian branch of Inuit Circumpolar Council for 7 years, and then I was chair for the last 4 years, which represented 155,000 of us Inuit in the Arctic, in the circumpolar world where we live, and that's Greenland, Alaska, Canada, and Russia. Siberia, we have close to 2,000 Inuit who live there. And so 155,000 strong we are up there, but that's not many people. We used to be a lot more, but there was lots of diseases and other things that wiped out entire communities and entire families a long time ago. But we do have a high birth rate, as much as we have a lot of challenges with our health as well. My work recently in particular, and in the area of climate change, has really been about reminding people of their importance in the web of existence on this planet. And as I said, my core message has always been that we are all connected. And the Arctic may be far away from Florida. I flew down 3 hours down to Ottawa, then an hour to Toronto, and then another 3 down to here. But yet, the Inuit hunters who are challenged by the thinning ice is absolutely connected to the rising waters and the stronger hurricanes that are threatening your own shores here, and the melting glaciers of the Andes and the Himalayas, and to the flooding of the low-lying development, the small island states, or to the mudslides and wildfires of California. And so think about foreign policy and environmental policy in the same breath. And the work that I have done over the years, I've worked very closely with UNEP, and we've worked very closely with the global negotiations on POPs, as well as with the climate change, with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, because the organization that I was elected with, which of course continues to carry on, but with a new chair from Alaska, we have an rotating system, so Alaska is now chairing ICC. We have been very much a part of the global negotiations on the environmental degradation of the Arctic for well over 30 years now, where ICC was created back in Alaska, in fact, as a result of oil spills that were starting to happen, and thought we better unify because we're not so many people in the world. And so we have worked very closely, especially with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change more recently. And, for those of you who don't know, both Canada and the United States have signed and ratified this UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And I'd like to be able to start by quoting the objective of this particular Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this is what it says. The objective of this convention: stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. And such a level should be achieved within a time frame sufficient to allow ecosystems to adapt naturally to climate change, to ensure that food production is not threatened, and to enable economic development to proceed in a sustainable manner. Well, those are good words, and they're fine words, but dangerous climate change is already taking place in the Arctic. And already our biological diversity, the key to our subsistence food production, because we are a hunting, fishing, and gathering peoples, is already threatened. And so the objective of this convention is being breached here and now in the Arctic. And the Arctic is important in the global climate change and biological diversity debates. 3 years ago, in fact, the Governing Council of the United Nations Environment Program passed a resolution urging greater global attention to the Arctic. And in 2005, the Arctic was singled out in the G8 communique. And why is that? Because the Arctic is now considered the world's climate change barometer. And we Inuit, in fact, are the mercury in that barometer. And our hunters are the sentinels for the rest of the planet. We are constantly out there every single day, out on the land, on the ice, the snow. And so we can see the most minute of changes that are happening. We remain extremely connected to our food source and our hunting way of life, and to the cycles of nature and the rhythms of nature. So what is happening in the Arctic now will happen. And in fact, we start to see now the evidence that already this is happening and what the actual Arctic barometer is saying. And we start to see all of these changes that are happening in different parts of the world. And you yourselves, I think, have already, witnessed many things here in Florida. Because for more than 20 years now, Inuit hunters and elders have reported melting permafrost, thinning sea ice, receding glaciers, increased coastal erosion, longer and warmer summers and shorter winters. And in fact, in Alaska, if you Google Shishmaref and Kevalina, you'll see that they're falling literally into the sea, where you see the homes are literally gone into the sea. And if you want to take a look at some of those pictures, you just have to Google those places and you'll see what is happening in Alaska, USA. Alaska, by the way, is hit the hardest of the 3 countries where we Inuit live. And so we are also, the changes are happening to the local plants and to the animals as well. We're starting to face a real invasion of species that we've never seen in the north before. We have grizzly bears that are coming further north than previously, and in fact they're mating with polar bears. So we've seen a hybrid bear already up there. And each year we're finding more southern fish and birds and insects, things that we don't even have names for, because they're following the warming trend and heading into the Arctic more and more. And they may vary place to place, but the trend is certainly consistent in all of the 4 countries. Climate change affects every facet of our life. We are, as I say, the people of the snow, the land, and the ice. And our hunting culture and the life it depends upon thrives on the cold, in fact. And in fact, there is as much life under the ice as there is above it. And in fact, it's a real important animal, even though they're tiny. They're at the bottom of the food chain, and they count just as much. We often focus a lot on the big furry animals to protect, but really we need to be focused on even the smallest plankton and all the little life that lives down there. All of that is very important. And we're already facing major challenges adapting to environmental changes as a result of climate change. And we have had our hunters indeed fall through the thinning ice in our regions. We have had that in other places as well. And we've had a drowning in our region from glaciers that are melting so quickly that where it used to be safe for hunters to cross streams, those streams now have become torrent rivers. And so it becomes harder even for the animals trying to find their way around the changes that are happening, where their migratory patterns are shifting because of the rapid shifting of the ice flows and so on. And so many impacts from the Arctic are directly connected with those further south. And the Greenland ice cap, I'm sure some of you have been hearing about that more and more, is that it's melting at a faster rate than anybody ever thought possible. And in fact, Greenland holds enough water to add about 21 feet, 7 meters, 21 feet to global sea rise, a sea level rise. So as that water is released, it's sinking some of the small island developing countries, the low-lying states. And there's lots of people who live on those shores, off the shores of India. In fact, had to be abandoned just late last year. And closer to home, the coastlines and the local swamps and the marshes and the plant populations right here in Florida and Louisiana are threatened as well. All that fresh water also has a dangerous impact on ocean currents, and that regulate the planet's temperature. And I'm sure you have been hearing that from the many scientists that have been saying that as the ocean circulation is slowed down by adding fresh water from the Greenland ice cap, it's no longer able to cool down the waters of the southern hemisphere. And as the temperature of the waters in the southern hemisphere rise, the intensity of hurricanes and cyclones will grow. And already I think we're witnessing a lot of that in this part of the world. And I don't think I need to remind you that even a rich country like the United States is very vulnerable to all of these major, major changes. So the Inuit hunter is the sentinel, not only for the Arctic environment, but for people who have never even thought about the Arctic. And last year, the National Geographic reported that over 200 million people, many of them in Florida, live within 3 feet of the current sea level. That's a lot of people. And so the question is, how much longer will Inuit be able to be the planet's sentinels? That's the question. And I think responding in part to a lot of the observations that our hunters and elders have been observing, the ministers of foreign affairs of the 8-nation Arctic Council in 2000 of October authorized an Arctic climate impact assessment. Some of you may have heard about this. It took 4 years, over 300 scientists from 15 countries. It was in fact chaired by the United States. The secretariat was in Fairbanks, Alaska. The majority of the scientists were American. And lots of money from America went into this assessment. And we worked very closely with them as Inuit, the Sami, the Gwich'in, the Athabaskan, the Aleut, and the indigenous peoples in Russia. And when it was released in November 2004, around the world, newspapers were out with melting glaciers, disappearing sea ice, and the stressed polar bears. And basically what it says are 3 things. You can download this too as well, of course, and look at all of what ACIA says. Basically, it says 3 things. Climate change is happening now in the Arctic. It's not a theory in the future. It's happening now. And 2, it is quickly going to get worse. And 3, climate change in the Arctic has worldwide consequences. And there are 2 conclusions in there that I think really that we've highlighted in terms of it being such a very dramatic issue for us in the Arctic. And it highlights links between climate change, biological diversity, and our own cultural rights. And do remember when I state these 2 conclusions that we are an ancient people with a hunting culture that is based on the ice and snow and the sea ice. And it says, marine species dependent on sea ice, including polar bears, ice-living seals, walrus, and some marine birds, are very likely to decline, with some species facing extinction. And for Inuit, warming is likely to disrupt or even destroy their hunting and food-sharing culture, as reduced sea ice causes the animals on which they depend to decline, become less accessible, and possibly become extinct. Now, we're very adaptable and resourceful. We've had to be, because that's the nature of our culture, is to be able to adapt and adjust and follow the seasons and the animals and so on. But I think the ACIA, the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment, foresees a time well within the lifetime of my own 9-year-old grandson, who is now learning to hunt, when environmental change will be so great that it will change the course of who we are in the Arctic. And as a hunting culture, it certainly will change all of that, especially because of the sea ice. And global warming has become and is the ultimate threat to our way of life as an Indigenous peoples. And the science released since the ACIA has only presented even a starker picture for those of you who have been following the fourth reports from the working groups of what we call the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was released this year, have ended this debate, this scientific debate on the causes of climate change, and recognize the rapid retreat of the polar ice sheet. And more recent science published in the journal Nature predicted that our Arctic Ocean may be free of ice by the summer of 2040. And that's 33 years from now. Now, 3 weeks ago, though, a team from Oxford released a study pushing that date even further forward, and they foresee an ice-free North Pole by 2020. It's coming. It's coming fast. We don't know when, but it is coming, and we are witnessing the melting of our planet firsthand up there at the top of the world. And let me tell you that the changes to our land and our local wildlife are getting harder and harder to ignore. And in fact, when my daughter was turning 30, not last February, but the February before, where I live, it was 47 degrees Fahrenheit when it should have been minus 22 Fahrenheit. It was raining when it should have been snowing. And we understand that weather is inherently variable, but this is well beyond our experience. And this winter, hunters around my home in the Cumberland Sound area were still waiting at the end of February for the ice to freeze hard enough to travel safely on. There was so much water, and it was so mild. And these changes are having an increasing toll on our local populations of the animals and the plants. Again, a biodiversity issue. And hunters reported ice so thin this year that even baby seals are falling through their cracking ice dens into the water. And that's around that, again, that area of Cumberland Sound. So deep and coordinated reductions in emissions of greenhouse gases by the developed and developing worlds is required to forestall the future projected in the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. And targets and timetables are absolutely needed, and there's just no getting around this. Earlier I quoted from the ACIA, and I ask you this question, as you've heard some of the things that came out of that assessment. How would you respond yourselves if an international assessment, put yourself in our shoes is what I'm trying to say. If that assessment concluded that your age-old culture and economy was possibly doomed, and how would you respond if your ancient way of life was destined to become a footnote in the history of globalization? Remember, we're 155,000 in the entire world, eh? Not that many when you think of in terms of the world population. And at global climate change negotiations, for those of you who have ever participated in any of these UN forums, I can tell you people are just rushing around, meeting to meeting, arguing all sorts of narrow technical points. And the bigger picture, the cultural picture, the human picture is not there. It's lost. And so climate change for me has always been about families, about children, about parents, and about how we live in our communities and how we lead our lives. And we have to regain this human perspective, I think, globally, if we're going to slow down eventually and stop human-induced climate change. And as I say, we're remarkable and adaptable people. We've weathered the storm on many fronts. You'd be amazed the kinds of things that we've had to weather. And we've gone from dog teams to skidoos and flying jumbo jets around the world, and we've come from living in igluviaks, in fact, which is snow houses, igloos. The communities that I come from, except for the larger center, we were all still in igluviaks when I was born. We embrace technology when we need to, because it's hard in the Arctic to remain the way that we were, just completely traditional. So we're not asking the world to stop all development. We're not asking ourselves to stop our own development if it's balanced in most of ways, in the best of ways. So these enormous changes to our communities have not been without consequences. We are known to have the highest suicide rates in North America, especially our young men between the ages of 16 and 24. There are lots of breakdown of society as a result of the speed in which change has happened in our world. But we're trying to make it. We're trying to remain connected to a hunting culture that is so wise, that a hunting culture that is so misunderstood. It is not just about the killing of animals, going out there in the technical aspect of a hunt. It is about preparation of our young people for life. It is about teaching them as they're out in the land to be patient, to be bold under pressure, how to withstand stress, how to be courageous, how to be patient, how to not be impulsive, how to have sound judgment, how to be wise. And these skills that our young people are being taught traditionally are very transferable to the modern world. And in fact, in a transitioning culture like ours, they are a requirement for survival in the modern world. Because in the modern world, it is when those skills kick in, when you want to say no to self-destruction, to suicide, to addictions, to violence, all of those things. And so they're connected, you see. It isn't just about the killing of animals. The process of the hunt is powerful. We don't want that to be lost, because we need that now as a people coming out the other side of modernization and trying to make it from the first wave of tumultuous change, that this second wave, a huge wave, that is now going to impact and already impacting the very thing that we are looking to for solutions and answers, our culture, our hunting culture, based on the cold, the ice, and the snow. Do you see the connections? That's where we're at. It's a people issue. It's a family issue. It's my grandson's life we're talking about. And that's what this has always been. And so it's important that we look at all of these issues as a way to get the world to understand that this is a human issue. And so it is our ability, our right and our ability to exist as an Indigenous peoples, that we started to move in the direction under my leadership to ensure that we were going to put ourselves on the map, that this was going to be definitely not just a human face on the map for the sake of it being a human face, that it was going to become a human rights issue. So in December, after 2 years of preparation, we submitted a 175-page climate change-related petition to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Myself, along with 62 hunters and elders and women from Canada and Alaska, on behalf of all of our people, launched this petition. And our petition, it's not just a signatures on, a petition that you sign. It's a legal piece of work, a legal assertion of our rights. And our petition asks the Commission to come to the Arctic to see what climate change is doing to our environment and to us. We sought a declaration that the destruction of the Arctic environment and the culture and the economy of our people, the Inuit, as a result of virtually unrestricted emissions of greenhouse gases by the United States, which is the source of approximately 25% of the world's emissions, was indeed violating our human rights as guaranteed in the 1948 American Declaration on the Rights and Duties of Man. And again, let me clearly state that this petition is not about money. We were not seeking damages or compensation, because I think it would have been easy for people to dismiss our case if that had been the case. And so we simply asked the United States to stop violating our rights by addressing the issue of lowering greenhouse gas emissions. We are, what our rights are, what are our rights, you might be asking, as defined in the 1948 Declaration, and which rights are being violated in that way? Very specifically, we stated our right to life and physical security, our right to personal property, our right to health, our right to practice our culture, our right to use land traditionally used and occupied, and the right to the means of subsistence. And in terms of relief, we asked the Commission to recommend that the United States, number one, adopt mandatory measures to limit its emissions of greenhouse gases in cooperation with the community of nations. Two, take into account the impact of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions on the Arctic and Inuit before approving all major government actions. Three, in consultation with Inuit, develop a plan to protect Inuit culture and the Arctic environment and mitigate any harm caused by the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. And four, in cooperation with Inuit, develop a plan to help our communities adapt to the unavoidable impacts of climate change. Very reasonable. And in fact, they are responsible suggestions, and these are the types of things that governments do who are in any political stripe or country and should be doing to protect and help their citizens in the first place, and to preserve biological diversity and to promote sustainable development. So they're not unreasonable requests. And the purpose of the petition was to educate and to encourage the government of the United States to join the community of nations in a global campaign to combat climate change. It was not an act of aggression or confrontation. We were reaching out, not striking out. And it is a powerful and a very assertive legal defense of our human rights. But I have always said that this is a gift from an ancient culture, from the Inuit to the United States and to the world, in fact, and it's an act of generosity from this ancient culture that is deeply still very tied to the natural environment and still in tune with its wisdom. And it's a gift to an urban, industrial, and modern culture that has largely lost its sense of place and position in the natural world. And I have always said, when I launched this petition in Montreal, December 2005, it is probably the most caring act I have ever brought forward in the protection of my culture, and the most caring act I have ever brought forward in the protection of the future for my grandson. And so the energy behind this very powerful, strong legal assertion is one of caring for our world as well as all of our world. And so in November of 2006, the Commission informed us that they had rejected the petition at that time, seemingly on technical grounds. And of course, I responded immediately with 2 letters requesting that the Commission at the very least begin investigating the climate change impacts on human rights of the peoples of the Americas. And they responded and said, yes, if you expand that, not to just to be Arctic focused and not just on human impacts, but we want to know more about the legal aspects of connecting climate change and human rights, then yes, we will host a hearing. And so historically, March the 1st, we went down on, actually, was it March the 1st or February? March the 1st, actually it was, hosted their first hearing on the links between climate change and human rights. And I presented along with the lawyers that I have been working with. I have a legal team, in fact, most of them are American, from San Francisco, Earth Justice, and also from the Center for International Environmental Law, Washington-based. Both Martin Wagner and Donald Goldberg have been instrumental in their work with me on this, and I with them. And with Paul Crowley, who was my legal counsel, who works and lives in Iqaluit and who has his own dog team. And so we have been a team. And I also worked very closely with two American students who sought me out and wanted to work with me on this pioneering work, one from Dartmouth University and one from Harvard. And those two young men, remarkable, went into the communities in Alaska and Canada and taped all the testimonies of our hunters, elders, and women, who then we used in the petition itself. So it was a real coming together of these synergies and these common ground energy that was so important to address this issue. And it was Canadians, Canadian Inuit, Alaskan American Inuit, and my team that were Canadian as well as with the teams in America. It is really our hope that this first session is going to result in perhaps a string of hearings. We haven't heard back from them since, but that's really our hope, and we're hoping that's going to be the case. And that hopefully down the road declarations will be cited. And from the Arctic, I think we have opened that door. We've always said, yes, by all means, use the Arctic. Use the compelling Inuit story to open up understanding of this issue and to open up the doors if need be. So we've shared this message. And because our culture is still a very sharing culture, we share that early warning with the rest of the world so that we can all come together on common ground and understand that we are a shared humanity. And so through our efforts, we've put the human face, and in this case, the Inuit face, front and center. And many of the lawyers who perhaps some of them will present after me, knows just how stale and removed from reality the international climate change negotiations can become, as I indicated earlier. So our work, I think, really helped to change the international discourse from a very dry, technical, economic debate to discussions about human values and human rights. And I think we gave the United Nations Climate Change Conference a heartbeat and a real renewed sense of urgency to all of this. And what we did, and why we did this, simply by reminding people so far away from the Arctic that our Inuit hunters who are challenged by the thinning ice is definitely connected to the cars we drive, to the policies we make or not make, to the laws that you choose to enforce. So there is that connection that we all have to understand, that we all have a sense of responsibility to one another. And I think climate change is perhaps the biggest challenge we face as a human collective. And it is overarching, complex, and requires urgent and immediate action. And we understand from climate change science that our window of opportunity is about 10 to 15 years right now, where we can really coordinate all of our actions by all states, from developed to developing worlds, to come together so we can forestall the future that's projected in the Arctic Climate Impact Assessment. And the United States must quickly become the international leader in greenhouse gas reductions. And our work with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights has been a means of inviting the United States to talk with us and to put this global issue in a human rights context where it belongs. And our intent, again, as I say, is to encourage and to inform. And in democracies, when people ask me, what do you really do? I say, well, I try to encourage and change public opinion so that it can become public policy. And I think that's what we need to continue to do, is that. And the massive upswelling of popular support for climate change action in the United States this year alone. There's new rhetoric from your Congress, and the strong message from your Supreme Court to the present administration are all very, very encouraging signs, as I'm sure those of you who know this and are experiencing that now. And at last, public opinion is starting to move in our direction and is beginning to shape public policy. And our petition, again, as I say, is aiming always, has always been to aim to change hearts, minds, and the climate change policy of the United States. And it is our means to turn that public opinion into public policy. And just before ending, I want to say that when I was growing up, since I launched the petition, I have more invitations for speaking engagements in the United States than I do anywhere else in the world, because the citizens of America are ahead of their own government from what I'm experiencing and want to do the right thing. And when I was a child growing up, we were growing up in a time when things were pretty tough. And in my mother's time, even before this was before I was born, during the Second World War, we were going through starvation, great famine. And even our own governments had forgotten about us up there in the Arctic. And during the Second World War, the Americans arrived, building airstrips. And with that came supplies and food and jobs for our men. And we have a soft spot in our hearts for America because they always have come through for us. And so I always say now in this work of climate change, we need you back. We need the leadership of America back. In the same way that you have came to us when we needed you in the Arctic. Come back, because we need you, the Arctic needs you, and the planet needs you. So with that, if you want to take a look at the petition, you can certainly look at the Inuit Circumpolar Council website and view the video of the commission hearing as well, because it's all there. You can listen to it as well. And thank you all very, very much for having me here today. And always remember, and I always say this, we can work together, because if we protect the Arctic, we can save this planet, because we are all one. Nakolmik, thank you.